Hello Ospreys, my name is Tony. Every week I scour the indie game website itch.io and pick 5 games to play. This week I decided to not do that. Instead, if you're an aspiring video game developer, this video is for you. I'm going to be looking at 5 classic and successful indie games and talk about what they did right. Also, for anyone who just comes for game recommendations, look to see if you have these games or if you Hyper Light Drifter has to be my favorite indie game of all time, and is only second to Bloodborne. For those that haven't played it, it's like the original Zelda game fused with Dark Souls and added an absolutely beautiful story on top of it. The first lesson to learn from this game is that you don't need a lot to make a game. This game was made with Game Maker Studio 2, which is something that most people write off due to its drag and drop coding over traditional coding. It just goes to show that you don't need to know how to code to make games these days. You don't really need to know a lot. You just need to have good skills and good ideas for your game. Another lesson to learn from this game is that you don't even need voice acting or text to tell a really good story. All of the story in this game is told through cutscenes, environments, or pictures. Not a single word is uttered throughout the game. And the story is one that the developer knows all too well, as the disease the main character is based on the lead developer's own heart disease. This is another lesson. Make your story in your game personal. It's easier to believe a story if you felt the feelings that are being portrayed. The game mechanics are well polished and satisfying, making the game smooth and easy to get into. I could just keep going on about this game, but I'm going to end on the level design. The game uses the level design to show secrets, tell a story, and challenge the player. No area in this game ever feels unnecessary, and the game is so beautiful, I use it as my desktop background. I think this game deserves your attention in studying. FTL, Faster Than Light, is one of those games that makes you want to keep playing over and over and over and over, and you get the point. I think you can learn that you don't need a huge art budget to make a game. Most of the art here is very simple, and a lot of the animations, if not all of them, are done through programming. This is really helpful for people like me who are very good at programming but aren't very good at art and therefore can't make a very artistic game. Another lesson to take from this game is the idea of systems. The game is focused around systems and their interactions. Just as a brief explanation, and this is very brief, you could really get a lot more into this. Systems are a set of mechanics or events that happen dynamically in a game. Think fire happening or oxygen going out. The genius is having the systems combine the things the developer could have never imagined. Fire destroys the rooms and does damage, but oxygen kills fire, but it also kills your players or your crewmates. So having the oxygen out can be beneficial to get out of fire, but if a crewmate is in there, you have to work faster than that. But if you have a crewmate in a med bay while the oxygen is off, the crewmate will usually stay alive. So these systems all combine to create a really complex game through just some simple programming. Drones get hit by missiles that accidentally come towards them and then cancel out the missile's effects. It's just so well done, and like the game knows exactly what it's trying to do in these systems, and then the systems just go off and do whatever they want, and the developers have no idea. Finally, the roguelike aspect of the game makes it so you can play multiple sessions very quickly and very often. It takes no longer than an hour to get into the end, and it's real easy to just play a new game. It shows that you can have a really engaging game that isn't long. You can beat FTL within the first hour of getting it, but you want to keep playing because there's so many things that you can discover and learn throughout the game that it makes it interesting and makes you want to keep playing this really fun experience. So you don't need an extremely complex game that is an RPG that lasts like 40 hours with this complex story. If you can just get a really good hour-long experience that you can repeat, you have a great game on your hands. Overall, this game has so many lessons that you can take for small indie games and trying to figure out how to keep players engaged when you don't really have the money to do very complex, engaging stories, and you have to focus on other things. So look into this game if you're looking to make a really, really good experience for a roguelike kind of game.
I hear thunder. Pitter patter. Time to wake up.
Fury is basically a rhythm Souls-like game. It has a lot of lessons to teach, and the first of which is you don't need a traditional game structure to make a really good game. Fury only has bosses. There isn't a traditional level in Fury. There's no traditional enemies. You just walk towards the next boss fight or you're in a boss fight. You don't need to spend the effort to make a whole bunch of enemies or NPCs if you don't have that time or desire. You can make a game that is completely all bosses and have a really unique and deep experience that really challenges the player. You just need those good mechanics to back that up. Next, the game shows that simple ideas can lead to complex gameplay. There aren't a lot of mechanics here. I mean, you have move, shoot, slash, and dodge. That's really it. There's not much. Like, you can charge up a slash, and you can charge up a dodge, or charge up a shot, my bad, and that's all you can do. There isn't anything else besides that, but because of the way that the enemies fight against you and you have to dodge their patterns and how the patterns can get increasingly complex based on how the way that the game uses like the bullet patterns, like having some bullets seek you and having some bullets that you can't dodge through, and having all of these really, really different setups, it leads to a game that has really, really complex and different varied gameplay based on every playthrough, because you never know what the patterns are going to be, but it's really simple to make. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't take that long to make the first like 2 boss fights because of how little patterns there are, but it still is incredibly fun and incredibly satisfying to get through these patterns. And I'm not trying to say that they didn't spend a long time on this, because this game is clearly a really big project, but still, it's really impressive. Finally, this game shows you that you don't need a perfect AAA experience to make a great game. For example, in the game, I saw there was a moment where I was just in a cutscene and I was able to move around, and I saw that I could when you turn the character using the movement, when you first start moving, it instantly snaps the player into the direction that it's going. Most AAA games don't do that. They simply just move the character through rotation, and like if you look at like Red Dead Redemption or something like that, the character rotates around to the position in which you're doing, and it takes a little bit of time, but Fury instantly snaps the player into that direction. Now, that isn't a bug per se, but it's still a feature that most people would consider unpolished, and it's still an amazing game, and I would not put that past them. But you don't need a perfectly polished game if you have really good and interesting mechanics like Fury does. And obviously you should always try and remove every single bug in your game, but there's going to be some quirks and some flaws that come out in your game that you just can't really fix, and sometimes that can be really, useful and add a lot of charm to your game. So you don't need to strive completely for perfection. You just need a fun and engaging game. And that's what Fury is. Look to this game for something that is fun and something that gets your blood pumping. Down well is the perfect example of a simple game. You fall down a well, you can move left and right and jump and shoot. That's all you do and that's all you need. First lesson, follow the PISS rule. You don't have the time or the skills to make the next Uncharted or Tomb Raider or Dark Souls. Trust me, I have thousands of projects in my folders that have the name Souls-like Demo for a reason. I cannot, and you cannot, make it the next Dark Souls. You should make a game where you fall down a well, which is obviously, you shouldn't, but you get what I'm trying to say here. You should make a game that is simple and make it simpler, and use those simple mechanics to your advantage and put new twists on them. Along with the roguelike elements of this game, the next lesson you should take from this game is the reward of playing. I think this game doesn't do it well, which is a shock. I'm talking about a game that I think doesn't do something well, but hear me out here. As far as I know, you either get new modes or new talents, and I don't think that is enough incentive to play the game. Like, obviously, I like to play the game because it's fun, but there's no reason to go back to it after I've gotten my satisfaction out of it. There's no reason to keep playing and stay up all night, except for beat my high score, which is plenty good, but for example, in FTL, I constantly am striving to get the new ships, so I play longer than I should because I'm trying to get this new ship, and that makes me want to play that game more. But I still think the game is great, and that is just kind of an example of a lesson that you can take that isn't positive. Not every lesson you can take from a game is positive. You should also look at the negatives of the game and say, what makes this game fun and what makes this game not fun, what makes me want to keep playing, what makes me not want to keep playing. Those are what you should take from any game that you play. Finally, I think this game has a good listen with the way it does music. The way the game pauses music strategically really raises immersion. It makes me feel like I am interacting with the game and the game is reacting to what I'm doing, which is really, really impressive and really, really satisfying as a player. When you're making a game, you have to think about what is satisfying to the player. I imagine most of you also play games if you're a game developer. That's kind of how it ends up being, so you need to think about when you play a game, you need to think about what makes you satisfied, what makes you think, wow, that was a really interesting moment, or I did a really interesting thing with those mechanics. And I think this game is a great example of that. And I also think this is a great example of how simple games are still great, and how you can use simple mechanics like jump and shoot, and put a twist on them, and still make a unique game. Hollow Knight is a game that you should really take everything from. There is no bad lesson in this game, I personally think. I'm also biased because I really love this game, but there's thousands of things you can take from this. First lesson is subtlety. The game tells such a story in the minor details. For example, how the false knight starts to talk differently once you reveal his true nature, or how you can hear the caterpillars in the jars from far away, or how the platforms slightly fall when you land on them. I could go on and on. This game has so many small moments that make you feel immersed in the world and keep you looking for more things. And like, I could play this game for hours and not know that I was playing a video game. And like, obviously I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but I think that that's still an accurate thing to say about it. It's genuinely a really amazing feat in indie video games because it has such polish in it for such a simple game. And that's another lesson to take from it. The game is simple. It's very, very simple. It's jump and slash, you know, and it still does a lot with that. For example, slashing down lets you bounce on things, basically. And it can be really useful for platforming sessions. And eventually you get a dash and you get a bunch of other traversal mechanisms. But ultimately it still comes down to jump and slash. And it's still able to make such an engaging and fun game out of those two very simple and very classic mechanics, that it shows once again you don't need to try and reinvent the wheel when you're making a video game. You can use the mechanics that other people have built up and used for such a long time and just do your own take on it and do your own version of these wonderful games. And I think that Hollow Knight shows that perfectly. Lesson 2, though, is navigation. The game has you backtrack quite often, which some people might not like, but I personally think is amazing because it lets me revisit the areas and see what has changed and so on and so forth. And the areas all have distinct landmarks and they give you maps and stuff like that, but you have to figure out exactly what things look like and like where you are and what is what, and it just works really well. I think the navigation is so much fun, and I also like that kind of thing. I played Morrowind back in the day where you didn't even have a mini map, you just had a rough map of the location and you had to figure out where you wanted to go, and I loved that. I love navigation and stuff like that, but I think that Hollow Knight really shows that you can make a unique game out of trying to figure out where you are and where you need to go. And finally, I think the level design in this game is just textbook amazing. The game knows exactly how to challenge you and exactly where to let you relax and just de-stress about what you've just gone through. It knows when to pull its punches and knows when to let you experience an extreme challenge when you want to. It's just amazing how they know exactly what to do every time. The game is a serious lesson in simplicity, level design, and patience in making games, and you should take every lesson that you can from it because it will enrich your game design and your games for worlds to come. Hey, thanks for watching, Ospreys. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram at UNF Spinnaker TV. Remember to stay safe and wear your mask.